In this video, we'll be covering Python debugging using the PDB library. PDB is an interactive source code debugger. It's a way of pausing a Python program to look at a set of variables. It has a couple of advantages. First of all, there's no IDE required. And number two, it can run on your web server depending on your configuration, and it's not tied to your local development environment per se. So in this example, what we have is a script that processes a text file containing different stocks. This is from a previous tutorial. Okay, to get started, the first thing that we need to do is we need to import PDB. And so wherever we want our breakpoint to be, all we need to do is call the setTrace method. So I'll just go ahead and do that right here. And so this will set a breakpoint. It will stop and pause the program while we're running it. And what it does is it has a list of different things we can do once we pause the program. We could do things like list the surrounding lines of code. We can print out values of different variables. So let's go ahead and return to our script, and then let's run that. Okay, so now we are paused on line 15. And so what's showing is the start of the for loop for our stocks, and that is the next line that we'll be executing. So from here, we could use any number of options. If let's say the file is really long and we have multiple places that we set breakpoints, we can list the surrounding lines of code very easily. And so all that requires is the L command. And then if I go ahead and expand this, what we have is a total of 11 surrounding lines of code. And so where the arrow is pointing at our for loop, that's the next line of code that we'll be executing. We can also use a double L for a longer list. And that's going to print out the contents of everything inside of our function. Since it's printing out everything within the scope of our function, there are times where if it was a short function, it would actually show less than the regular list command. And then if we're not inside of a function at all, it's usually going to just show the entire contents of the script that you're in, so the entire file. And then we can also print the stack trace, so that's using the where command, which we can just type in W. And we'll see that we're on line 17 going into our for loop. And then we call the process stocks file. We called this function from line 42. If we scroll down here, this executed just before we went into this function right here. And then so any variables that are in scope, we can go ahead and print those. Let's say we have, so stocks is something that we have in scope, and what it is a list, basically every line that was in the text file. And notice it hasn't been processed yet because that's what it does when it goes into the for loop. And just to make it easier, since the first one is the header row, we can just use the index value just to get one of our items that's in one of the lines that's in the file. So once we have paused our program, we can go ahead and add even more breakpoints. Let's say we wanted a breakpoint inside of our loop. We could put a breakpoint at line 18. And then so we can just call the B command by itself to list the breakpoints that we have added. Now, if we set these all up calling the setTrace method, this is not going to work. It's only for any breakpoints that you've added using the B command. Once you have paused the program and PDB is running. We can add even more. Let's go ahead and put one inside of this loop also. So put one at line 25. And then if we run B by itself again, it'll just give us a running list of all the breakpoints that we put in. So now that we have put those in, we can go ahead and execute more code. If we want to execute just one line, we can use the next, which is N. So N will take us to line 18. So we just gotten inside the for loop. So now the variable stock should be in scope. In this case, it's going to be the header row of the text file. And we can go ahead and run another line. And that's going to take us to line 19. Since we have a breakpoint at line 25, we can use the C command, continue, and that will continue until the next line has been hit. I'm sorry, that will continue until we reach the next breakpoint. So now, well, we're inside the for loop, so it went back to the top of the loops. Okay, so now that we've processed the header row, we're basically now inside of this else block, and then so we hit this on the second time we passed through the original for loop, so that's why we didn't hit it the first time. And so once again, we can just go ahead and print our variables. And that's going to give us a list of everything that is in that. We can also use so we can type in the variable by itself, and then using the P for print, that will also do the same thing. Another thing we could do is, since we're inside of these loops, what's going to happen a lot of times is if this gets excessively long, then trying to keep continuing when we're just going to hit another breakpoint inside of our for loop. So what we have to do is we have to start clearing these. So let's go ahead and so we use a CL command to clear, and we can clear one. And then if we list our breakpoints again, the one that we have left is number 2. And so if we keep continuing, obviously we're going to hit this every single time we go through this loop. So let's go ahead and clear the other one. Now this is different from using set trace, because set trace, we have to do a hack in order to get out of the loop, which I'll cover here in a minute. So now if we go ahead and continue, we should reach the end of the file, which we did. Now what I'm going to do for this next example is I'm going to move this set trace inside of our loop. And since we have a whole bunch of stocks, we're going to hit this multiple times. So now notice we don't have any breakpoints in memory, so we have no way of clearing this. So if we keep continuing, we're just going to keep running into the same issue. So what we need to do here is a bit of a hack. And what I normally do, let's say I just want to run the rest of the file. I don't want to hit any more breakpoints at all. But the problem is every time there's a set trace method, it's going to pause the program again. So what I usually do is just override the set trace method. So I'll use something like pdb.setTrace. And let's just make that equal to a lambda function. And return none. And it looks like we have a misspelling. And if we run continue, we can just run through our entire program. Now notice how at the end of the file here, we're looping through our stocks and using the pretty print method for the stock. I'm going to take this out and change it to pass. And we won't print anything to the terminal, but we'll put in a set trace. And we can pretty print inside of our debugger also. So let me go ahead and comment this one out so we don't keep hitting that. Okay, so now we're inside of our for loop, and if we just print the stock, and notice we can use P for the print command. And that's basically the same thing as just typing in the variable and hitting enter. What we can do is we can also use pretty print. And that's going to be similar to importing pretty print and running it. It just makes, if you're inside of a dictionary or something that's pretty long and sophisticated, this comes in very handy. It makes it much more easy to read and understand the contents of a variable in certain cases. In this next example, I'll go ahead and put a breakpoint here. If we run that, so now we're about to execute line 25. And let's say we wanted to run everything until we hit line 33. There is an until command. So the symbol for that, the shorthand for that is UNT. And then we just pass in a line number. Okay, now we're about to execute line 33. This could be handy. Let's say you don't want to, you want to do this one time, but you don't want to set another breakpoint. The until command can be a replacement for that. Okay, so this next example, I'm going to pull this one out, and right before our return statement, I'm going to add a new one. Okay, so we have our variable stock info list. So we have this list here. We can try to pretty print it. And you know what, that does work just fine. But if we wanted to do something like for stock in, we're going to have a bit of an issue because we can't just put in like a multi-line for loop, just using the PDB as it is. There is a way around that. So for that, we're going to have to import the code library. So I'm going to use the exclamation to import locally. And then we're going to need code.interact. And so we need our local variables. Now let's go back and copy this for. So as you can see, at this time, we were able to put in our for loop, print the stock as is. And so this is very handy depending on what you're in. Let's say you're in deep into a function and you have some sort of list where you just need to, it's really long and you need to run like a for loop and do something with the code. So this is one way to do that within PDB. We just need to run this line right here to import the code library and the interact library, the interact method. Okay, so let's say we wanted to continue this, but we're still inside this interactive shell, but we want to exit the interactive shell and go back to the PDB prompt. So what we need to do is use Control D. So we're out of the interactive console. Now we're right back to where we were before. And our breakpoint, we're in the same spot basically. So this is one way to basically turn PDB into an interactive shell if we need to either run something or do more than just print out a variable. Now in this case, we're all finished with what we're doing. As I described briefly earlier, all we need to do is Q for the quit command, and that's going to just quit the script entirely. And this concludes the tutorial on using PDB for Python debugging. Thank you for watching.